It was a quiet Saturday afternoon in a small town where life moved slowly, and people still knew their neighbors. The sun hung gently in the sky, warming the streets and making the leaves on the trees shimmer in a soft golden light. The kind of day where nothing exciting ever seemed to happen, and yet for some people it was the perfect moment to enjoy a little peace. Among the few people walking that afternoon was Mrs. Ellen Parker. She was 82 years old, a small woman with silver hair neatly tied back and eyes that still sparkled with warmth despite the years. Ellen lived alone, but she had friends nearby and a routine she cherished. Every Saturday she would put on her favorite comfortable shoes, grab her cane, and take a slow walk around the neighborhood. She loved the simple pleasures, the birds chirping, children laughing in the distance, and the smell of freshly baked bread from the corner bakery. It was her time, a peaceful moment to reflect and enjoy the quiet rhythm of life. On that particular Saturday, Ellen followed her usual route. She greeted Mr. Thompson, who was tending to his garden, with a soft, "Good afternoon," and he smiled back, tipping his hat politely. She stopped by the small park at the end of her street, tossing crumbs to the birds and enjoying their tiny fluttering wings and cheerful chirps. In these moments, Ellen felt alive, connected to her community and content with the simplicity of life. But the calm of the afternoon was about to be broken. Down the main street came the roar of motorcycle engines, loud and forceful, shaking the peaceful air. A group of bikers was riding together, leather jackets glinting in the sunlight, chains clinking with every turn of the wheels. Their presence was hard to ignore. Children stopped mid-laugh, couples paused on the sidewalks, and even the birds scattered in startled bursts. It was clear from the noise and the way the bikers carried themselves that they were used to being noticed, and that they liked the feeling of attention. Ellen tried to step aside, wanting to stay out of their path. She had no interest in confrontation. She just wanted to continue her walk in peace. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One biker, sitting a little ahead of the group, turned his head sharply and noticed Ellen. He slowed just enough to leer at her, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. There was something about his expression that made Ellen tense. She felt a chill in the warm afternoon air, a sense that he didn't just see her, he wanted to make her feel small, unworthy, and exposed. Before she could step back, the biker shouted. His words cut through the air like knives. They weren't just loud. They were cruel and racist, mocking her appearance and using language that should have no place in polite society. Ellen's hands tightened around her cane. She had lived a long life and seen many things, but the sting of being publicly humiliated was always sharp, no matter the age. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The laughter of the biker echoed in her ears, and the gentle hum of the town faded into silence. A few neighbors had noticed and were staring, uncertain, shocked, or angry. No one moved immediately. Ellen, proud as ever, tried to steady herself. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she had no reason to sink to his level. She said nothing, remaining calm despite the humiliation. Her silence was not weakness, it was dignity. The biker, however, was oblivious to this. He was caught up in the thrill of asserting power, in the idea that making someone else feel small somehow made him feel bigger. He laughed and called out more insults, clearly expecting a reaction. A small crowd had started to form, people who were curious or concerned, some recording the moment with their phones. Ellen felt the weight of embarrassment and helplessness, but she refused to let it break her spirit. At that moment, she noticed someone else standing nearby. At first, she didn't know who it was, a tall man casually observing the situation. He wasn't part of the crowd, and there was a calm intensity about him. His presence was noticeable without being aggressive. Ellen instinctively felt a little relief, though she didn't know why. There was something reassuring about the way he stood. The quiet authority in his stance, the fact that he didn't immediately rush in but didn't ignore what was happening either. Ellen's mind raced. She had heard stories of people intervening in such situations, but she had never experienced it herself. Would this man step forward? Would he say something to defend her? Part of her wanted to retreat, to escape the spotlight and continue her walk at a safe distance. Another part of her, quietly stubborn and proud, wanted to remain upright and unshaken even in the face of such unprovoked cruelty. Meanwhile, the biker continued, oblivious to anyone but himself. He pointed, shouted, and laughed, his words sharp and hurtful. Yet as he did, the tall man's expression changed subtly. There was a flicker of something firm in his eyes, a sense that what was happening was wrong and that he couldn't stand by silently. The man's presence was enough to make the biker pause for a moment, just enough to notice that he was no longer the only person paying attention. The bystanders, sensing the tension, whispered to one another. Some murmured words of concern or anger. Others fumbled with their phones, ready to record, unsure of whether the situation might escalate. But no one wanted to approach directly. The biker looked intimidating, and many were hesitant to get involved. Ellen, despite her age, held herself tall, gripping her cane, refusing to show fear even though her heart pounded in her chest. The tall man moved a step closer, subtly positioning himself between Ellen and the biker without making sudden moves. His calm confidence was enough to change the energy of the moment. The biker, who had been feeding off fear and shock, now had to consider the fact that someone else was watching him and judging his behavior. For the first time, his laughter faltered, replaced with a confused glare. Ellen felt a quiet hope rising within her. She didn't know who this man was or why he had chosen to stand there, but his presence reminded her that she wasn't alone. Even in a moment where cruelty seemed overwhelming, there were still people willing to do the right thing, to intervene, and to protect the vulnerable. The engines of the other bikes rumbled behind, the group having slowed down to watch the exchange. The atmosphere, once dominated by the biker's arrogance, had shifted slightly. The bystanders were alert. The biker was uncertain, and Ellen, though still trembling a little, felt a sense of dignity returning. She had endured the insults without responding in anger, and now she could see that not everyone in the world condoned such behavior. The tall man's eyes met hers for a brief moment. He nodded slightly, a silent reassurance that he was aware and ready to act if necessary. Ellen returned the nod with a small, grateful smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Sometimes, she thought, the simplest gestures can mean the most in moments of fear and shame. The moment stretched, tense and fragile, as the biker realized that he was no longer just performing for himself. There were consequences now. His words hung in the air, echoing differently against the silent weight of someone standing up to him. Ellen's heart still raced, but it was no longer just fear. It was a mixture of relief and cautious hope. The quiet strength of the man nearby, combined with Ellen's own dignity, began to shift the balance of power in the situation. What had started as a painful, humiliating moment now had the potential to become something much larger, a lesson for everyone present about courage, integrity, and the quiet power of standing up for what is right. Ellen took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that the biker might continue, but she also knew that the presence of this man had changed the dynamics. Whatever happened next, she would not be alone. And in that simple knowledge, she found a surprising sense of strength, one that reminded her why she had always valued kindness, dignity, and resilience, even in the face of unfairness. The afternoon sun continued to shine, casting long shadows on the street. The birds returned to their perches, cautiously at first, as if sensing that the tension was beginning to ease. Ellen stood tall, gripping her cane, a quiet figure of grace and endurance in the midst of chaos. The man nearby remained alert, ready to intervene if needed, and the crowd watched silently, sensing that this was no ordinary day. In the small town, life was often calm, predictable, and routine. But in this moment, a ripple of courage and human decency had appeared, ready to transform what could have been a simple act of cruelty into a story of dignity, protection, and unexpected heroes. The morning after the incident, Ellen woke up feeling a mixture of relief and quiet pride. The memory of the biker's cruel words still lingered, but it no longer carried the same sting. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, yet she had endured it with dignity, and she had experienced something rare, a moment of courage and protection from a stranger who had stepped in when it mattered most. As she moved through her morning routine, Ellen reflected on what had happened. She remembered the roar of the motorcycles, the harshness of the biker's insults, and the sudden fear that had gripped her. Yet she also recalled the calm authority of the man who had stood beside her, the way he had spoken without anger, and the way his presence had shifted the energy of the street. That memory brought a warmth to her heart. It reminded her that even in a world where cruelty exists, kindness and courage are never far away. Ellen decided to take a short walk later that morning. The sun was gentle, the air fresh, and the streets quieter than the day before. She noticed neighbors tending to their gardens, children playing and the small town returning to its usual rhythm. Yet there was a subtle difference in how she viewed the world now. She felt stronger, more aware of her own resilience and more certain of the value of dignity and kindness. As she walked, some neighbors stopped her, curious about the previous day's events. People had heard rumors, whispers of a confrontation and the bravery of someone stepping in to protect her. Ellen, ever humble, did not boast. She simply recounted the events calmly, emphasizing how important it was to maintain dignity, even when faced with cruelty. She spoke of courage, not as a loud act of defiance, but as the quiet determination to stand firm and protect oneself and others. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," Ellen told them. "I simply stayed calm and refused to let him make me feel small." And someone else, someone who could have walked away, chose to stand up. That made all the difference. The neighbors listened intently. Some nodded in agreement, while others seemed to reflect on their own experiences and actions. Ellen realized that the impact of the event was growing beyond the street where it had occurred. People were beginning to understand that courage and kindness could ripple outward, influencing the way others behaved and the way communities responded to cruelty. Meanwhile, the biker from the day before had faced his own consequences. Word had spread quickly through social media and local circles. Videos captured by bystanders showed the confrontation, the biker's aggressive behavior, and the calm intervention of the man who protected Ellen. The footage circulated widely, and many people condemned the biker's actions. He had intended to humiliate someone publicly, but instead, he became a cautionary tale about arrogance, cruelty, and the consequences of his behavior. Ellen, when she saw some of the videos and comments online, was surprised. She had not expected the story to travel so far, nor had she imagined the lessons it could teach others. People praised the calm courage of the man who had intervened, but she quietly reminded herself and anyone who asked that the real hero was not just the stranger who stepped in, but also anyone who stands up for themselves with dignity, even in the face of fear. In the days that followed, Ellen's life returned to its usual rhythm, but the incident had left a lasting mark. She found herself more confident, more aware of the impact her actions could have, and more willing to speak about the importance of respect and kindness. She began to share her experience with friends, neighbors, and even at local community gatherings. Each retelling reinforced the lesson she had learned, that cruelty can be met with dignity, that courage is often quiet, and that standing up for what is right can inspire others in ways one cannot always predict. One afternoon, Ellen received an unexpected visit. A young reporter had heard about the incident and wanted to hear her story directly. Ellen agreed, speaking calmly about the events, the fear she had felt, and the courage she had witnessed. She emphasized that standing up for others is a responsibility everyone shares, and that the presence of someone willing to intervene can change the outcome of any situation. The interview was later shared online, reaching people far beyond her small town. Comments poured in from people who were inspired by her dignity, her calm courage, and the reminder that ordinary people can make a difference. Some shared their own stories of standing up to cruelty, while others admitted that they had sometimes felt powerless and afraid to act. Ellen read these messages with a quiet smile, feeling the subtle joy that comes from knowing that one's experience could inspire and encourage others. As the weeks went by, Ellen noticed a change in her neighborhood. People seemed more mindful, kinder, and more willing to step in when they saw someone in need. The ripple effect of the incident was visible not only online, but in everyday interactions, the small acts of care, the polite words, and the willingness to protect rather than ignore. Ellen realized that while the initial encounter had been painful, it had also become a catalyst for positive change. Ellen also thought about the stranger who had intervened, John Cena, though she still did not know his full identity at first. She reflected on the importance of his actions, not the fame, not the recognition, but the simple, quiet courage of standing up for someone else. His choice to protect her without aggression, to act with calm authority rather than anger, had left a profound impression on her. She realized that acts of kindness and bravery often go unnoticed, yet their effects can be long-lasting and deeply meaningful. One evening, Ellen received a letter from a local community organization, thanking her for sharing her story and encouraging others. They highlighted the lessons of dignity, courage, and the importance of standing against cruelty. Ellen felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that her experience could help foster understanding and compassion in her community. She reflected on how a single ordinary afternoon walk had turned into something extraordinary, teaching lessons about humanity and the power of standing firm. Ellen continued her daily walks, but now they carried a new sense of purpose. She moved with a quiet confidence, aware that her actions, her words, and even her presence could influence the people around her. She greeted neighbors with warmth, offered small gestures of kindness, and remained mindful of the lessons she had learned, that courage is not always loud, that standing up for what is right can ripple far beyond the moment, and that even in the face of fear, dignity and kindness matter. The biker's actions, in contrast, had left him isolated. While he may have intended to assert dominance or intimidate, the consequences of his cruelty were public and immediate. He had underestimated the power of courage and kindness, and the event became a reminder that arrogance and malice often backfire. Ellen thought about him occasionally, hoping that the experience had taught him something about respect, accountability, and the impact of his words on others. Through it all, Ellen never sought fame or recognition. She had endured a moment of humiliation, yes, but she had also discovered strength she hadn't fully acknowledged before. She realized that the true reward was not in attention or praise, but in the quiet knowledge that she had stood tall, preserved her dignity, and witnessed courage in action. That knowledge gave her a lasting sense of peace and empowerment. As time passed, the story became a part of local lore. People referred to it not as an extraordinary event of fame or spectacle, but as a lesson in human decency and courage. Children who heard the story learned that standing up for others matters. Neighbors realized the importance of community and vigilance, and adults were reminded that even small acts of bravery and kindness have the power to inspire. Ellen often thought back to that afternoon with a mix of emotions. There had been fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, yes, but also relief, pride, and hope. She had learned that courage is often quiet, that dignity can withstand cruelty, and that the presence of someone willing to protect others can change the course of events in profound ways. The lesson was simple, yet powerful. In a world where cruelty exists, kindness, courage, and integrity will always have their place. Even months later, when she walked down the same street, Ellen felt a sense of reassurance. She saw neighbors smiling, children playing, and people going about their lives with a little more mindfulness. She knew that the events of that day had left a subtle but lasting impact. And though the world could still be cruel at times, she understood that every act of courage and kindness, no matter how small, contributed to a better, safer, and more compassionate community. Ellen's story, at its core, became a testament to the power of standing up quietly, the importance of protecting others, and the extraordinary impact of ordinary people acting with dignity and courage. And in the heart of a small town, on a quiet street, she continued her walks, knowing that even in the simplest routines, life offered moments of courage, compassion, and hope that could change the world in ways people might never fully see but would always feel. The tense pause on the quiet street did not last long. The biker, who had been used to dominating every space he entered with noise and bravado, began to feel a strange unease. His eyes, which had been sharp with mockery just moments ago, flicked nervously toward the tall man standing between him and the elderly woman. The man did not shout, did not threaten, and yet there was a weight in his presence that made the biker hesitate. John Cena, though Ellen did not know it yet, had witnessed everything. He had been walking back from a charity event, enjoying the calmness of the small town when the roar of motorcycles drew his attention. At first, he thought it was just a group of bikers passing by, nothing unusual. But then he saw what was happening, an elderly woman being mocked and humiliated by one of the riders. Cena's brow furrowed as he watched, a mix of concern and quiet anger rising in him. Cena was no stranger to confrontation, but he knew that the right approach was not always aggression. Sometimes standing firm, showing calm confidence, and making it clear that certain behavior is unacceptable is far more powerful. He stepped closer, his pace measured, making sure he did not scare Ellen but was visible enough to the biker. The biker laughed nervously at first, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mind your business, old man," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to sound intimidating. But Cena did not flinch. He kept his eyes steady, his stance grounded, and his voice calm but firm. "You don't speak to people like that," Cena said. His tone was serious, carrying authority without anger. This woman has done nothing wrong. She deserves respect, and so does everyone here. The biker paused, clearly not expecting anyone to challenge him, let alone someone who looked physically imposing yet completely calm. The group of bikers behind him slowed as well, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Their laughter and engine noise faded into uneasy silence. Ellen, still clutching her cane, felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. She had been humiliated, yes, but now someone was standing up for her. She didn't know who this man was, but his presence felt like a shield, a promise that she was not alone. She straightened slightly, drawing a quiet, shaky breath as though trying to regain some of her dignity. Cena didn't shout or escalate. He knew that confrontation without reason could provoke violence, and he wanted to avoid that. Instead, he used his voice, his posture, and his calm confidence to create a barrier between the biker and Ellen. Every word he spoke reminded the biker that what he was doing was not acceptable and that there would be consequences if he continued. "Look around you," Cena continued. "People are watching. This isn't just about you and her. Actions like this don't go unnoticed. You're accountable for what you do, whether you realize it or not." The biker's smirk faltered. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, the silent judgment growing heavier with every second. What had started as a moment of power for him, making someone feel small and scared, was slipping away. He tried to recover, opening his mouth to say something, but Cena's calm stare made it impossible to speak without sounding ridiculous. The tension in the air was palpable. Bystanders shifted uncomfortably, some murmuring quietly to one another, others holding their phones ready to record. It was a delicate balance. One wrong move could escalate things, but Cena's presence ensured that the situation remained under control. He did not rely on threats or aggression. Instead, he relied on a quiet, firm authority that made it clear the biker's actions were unacceptable. Ellen, though still shaken, found herself drawing strength from the situation. She had endured the biker's insults without responding in anger, and now she could see that sometimes courage comes in different forms. She didn't need to shout or fight. Simply standing with dignity and allowing someone else to help was enough. Her heart pounded, yes, but it was mixed with hope and a sense of being protected. The biker, sensing the shift, tried one last attempt at intimidation. "Who do you think you are, huh?" He barked, pointing a finger at Cena, but Cena's expression did not change. His calm, steady presence seemed to absorb the biker's aggression rather than respond to it. "I'm someone who believes people should be treated with respect," Cena replied evenly. "And I'm not going to watch anyone treat her or anyone else like that." The biker glanced around, realizing that the crowd of onlookers had grown. There were whispers, a few raised eyebrows, and some phones recording. He could no longer act like his actions were private. What had been a moment of arrogance was now public, and the attention was no longer in his favor. Ellen watched, amazed at the calm authority of the man standing beside her. She didn't know who he was, only that he had chosen to intervene when it mattered most. In that moment, she felt a mixture of gratitude and relief, and she knew that this encounter would stay with her long after the bikers were gone. The biker's laughter faltered completely. The words he had intended to use to humiliate Ellen now felt hollow. Cena's presence had shifted the energy entirely, removing the power the biker thought he had. The group of bikers behind him exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of what to do next. They had been accustomed to fear and submission, and now they were facing the consequences of crossing a line in public. Cena spoke one more time, his voice steady and clear. "Actions have consequences. What you're doing is wrong. Step back and choose to be better. Otherwise, people will see who you really are." For a moment, the biker seemed paralyzed, caught between defiance and retreat. Finally, he muttered something under his breath, revved his engine, and rode off slowly, glancing back nervously at the growing crowd. The other bikers followed him, not daring to linger. The street was quiet once again. Ellen let out a shaky sigh, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had been scared, humiliated, and unsure of what to do. But now she realized that sometimes help comes in unexpected forms. Someone ordinary, or someone famous, as she would later discover, can make a difference simply by standing firm and showing courage. Cena turned to Ellen and offered a gentle smile. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft now, free of the authority from moments before. Ellen nodded, still holding her cane tightly. "I think so," she replied, her voice trembling but steady. "Thank you." For stepping in, Cena shrugged lightly, deflecting praise. You handled yourself with dignity, he said. I just helped make sure he couldn't hurt you further. You were brave, even when he tried to humiliate you. The two walked slowly together toward the nearby park benches, giving Ellen a chance to catch her breath and regain her composure. She shared a few stories from her life, laughing softly at some memories while Cena listened attentively. He didn't interrupt, didn't lecture, and didn't seek attention. His presence alone was enough to remind Ellen that courage and kindness often speak louder than anger. By the time they reached a quieter street, the tension from earlier had faded, replaced by a sense of relief and quiet reflection. Ellen realized that even in moments of fear and cruelty, there are people willing to stand up, willing to protect and willing to remind the world of what is right. And for Cena, it was a simple act of doing what he believed in, using his presence to protect, not to dominate, to defend rather than to attack. The afternoon sun continued to shine, warming the pavement and casting long shadows. Ellen and Cena paused near the corner of her street. She thanked him again, feeling a mix of gratitude and awe. He smiled one last time, then nodded, letting her continue her walk safely, knowing that she had regained her peace and dignity. The incident would not be forgotten by those who had witnessed it. The small crowd of bystanders, once unsure of what to do, had seen an example of courage and calm authority in action. And for Ellen, the experience reinforced a lesson she had lived by all her life. Dignity, kindness, and courage often show themselves in quiet, unexpected ways. The biker, meanwhile, had left a street full of people quietly shaking their heads, realizing that arrogance and cruelty rarely go unchallenged. What had started as an act of humiliation became a moment of reflection for everyone present. A reminder that courage is not just physical strength, but the willingness to stand for what is right, no matter the circumstance. Ellen walked the rest of her path slowly, but with her head held high. She felt stronger than she had when the biker first appeared, and she knew that she had experienced something extraordinary. Even in a small, quiet town, small acts of courage can ripple far beyond the moment, leaving lessons for those who witness them and those who hear about them later. The roar of the motorcycles slowly faded as the biker and his group disappeared down the street, leaving behind a quiet that almost seemed heavier because of the tension that had just passed. Ellen stood for a moment, gripping her cane, her breathing still uneven. The adrenaline from the encounter was slowly draining, leaving her shaken but also strangely empowered. She realized that she had endured something humiliating without losing her dignity, and that thought brought a quiet sense of pride. John Cena walked beside her, a calm presence that somehow made the world feel safer. He didn't rush or speak excessively, understanding that Ellen needed time to process what had happened. The two of them moved slowly, their footsteps echoing lightly on the pavement. Cena occasionally glanced at Ellen, ensuring she was steady, while Ellen took in the surroundings, noticing things she might have overlooked in her fear. The sun reflecting off the leaves, a bird perched on a fence, the soft hum of distant traffic. Ellen finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Not here, not in my town, she said. Her hands tightened slightly around her cane, a gesture of both nervousness and determination. I've seen cruelty before, yes, but never so direct, so personal. Cena nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's never easy to face someone like that, he said. But the way you handled it, standing your ground quietly, refusing to let him control the moment, that's courage. Ellen smiled faintly, feeling warmth from his words. She wasn't used to being praised for just existing with dignity, especially in a moment when others expected her to shrink or react in fear. I suppose. I've always believed that responding with anger doesn't help. You hold on to your peace no matter what they say. That peace is powerful, Cena replied, and it's what makes people see the truth. The truth is, his words say more about him than they ever will about you. As they continued walking, Ellen's mind began to wander, thinking about the incident and the impact it might have beyond that. Street. She imagined the biker going home, replaying the encounter in his mind, realizing that his attempt to humiliate someone had backfired. And she imagined the neighbors who had watched silently, now reconsidering their own actions and the importance of standing up against cruelty. Cena seemed to read her thoughts. What just happened here isn't just about you, he said. It's about everyone watching, everyone learning. Sometimes people need to see courage in action to understand what's right. Ellen nodded. She could feel the truth of that. In her lifetime, she had often been a quiet observer, valuing kindness and decency but rarely seeing them rewarded or recognized. Today, however, she realized that quiet courage could ripple outwards, affecting people in ways she hadn't anticipated. They reached a small bench near the edge of the park, and Ellen decided to sit. She felt the need to rest, her legs still a little shaky from the confrontation. Cena stayed standing nearby, giving her space but remaining close enough that she felt protected. For a moment, silence passed between them. A comfortable silence, filled with the aftermath of tension and the quiet of a peaceful afternoon returning. Ellen broke the silence with a reflective sigh. "I've lived a long life," she said softly. "I've faced challenges, yes, and I've seen the world change in ways I never imagined. But something like this, being humiliated by someone with no respect, it shakes you in a way I didn't expect." Cena nodded slowly. "It shakes all of us," he said. "And that's okay. What matters is what you do next, how you carry yourself after the fear. You're stronger than you realize, and moments like this show that to others as well." Ellen's thoughts turned inward. She remembered the fear she had felt when the biker first approached. The sudden shock, the humiliation, the instinct to shrink. But then she remembered her own strength, the ability to remain calm, and the unexpected support from Cena. She realized that courage often comes not from physical strength or loud words, but from the quiet determination to protect oneself and maintain dignity in the face of wrongdoing. Cena, noticing her reflective mood, decided to share a small insight. Sometimes people think courage is about fighting back with fists or anger. But the most powerful courage is standing up for what's right without letting the wrong make you bitter. You did that today. You protected yourself, and in doing so, you set an example. Ellen felt a smile tug at the corners of her lips. She hadn't expected to be part of a lesson or an example. All she had wanted was to take her walk in peace. Yet in this unexpected encounter, she found a story she could carry forward. A story of dignity, quiet courage, and the importance of standing firm. As they continued their slow walk back toward her home, neighbors began to notice Ellen again. Some waved, others offered words of concern or praise. A few had phones in hand, capturing moments from a distance. Ellen realized that the story of what had happened might travel beyond this street, beyond the town, and even further. And she felt a strange mixture of humility and pride, knowing that what she had endured might inspire others. Cena stayed with her until they reached her front gate. The two paused, and Ellen turned to him. "I don't even know your name," she said, her voice gentle but curious. Cena smiled warmly. "Does it really matter?" he asked lightly. "What matters is that you're safe and that you know not everyone in the world will let cruelty go unchecked." Ellen nodded thoughtfully. "You're right," she said, "but thank you. Truly." He gave a slight nod, a gesture of quiet reassurance, and stepped back. Ellen watched as he walked away, blending into the street until he was just another passerby. Yet even as he disappeared from sight, the impact of his presence lingered. She felt stronger, more confident, and more determined to live her life with the dignity and kindness that had always guided her. The afternoon continued, filled with the gentle hum of life returning to normal. Children resumed their play, neighbors returned to their routines, and the soft breeze rustled through the trees. Yet for Ellen, the quiet of the street was different now. She had faced cruelty, endured humiliation, and witnessed courage in action, and she understood that moments like these, though unexpected and challenging, could shape people in profound ways. That evening, as Ellen settled in her cozy living room, she reflected on the day's events. She thought about fear and courage, humiliation and dignity, strangers and heroes. She realized that life often presents challenges when least expected, and that the true measure of a person is not in avoiding difficulty, but in how they respond to it. Ellen also thought about the lesson she had learned from the stranger who had stood by her side. Courage was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was simply the presence of someone willing to intervene, to stand for what was right, and to protect those who couldn't defend themselves in that moment. That quiet courage could ripple outwards, affecting everyone who witnessed it. By the end of the day, Ellen felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had been frightened and humiliated, yes, but she had also experienced something rare, a reminder that goodness exists in the world, that courage can come from unexpected places, and that even ordinary people or someone famous can make a difference. In the days that followed, Ellen found herself recounting the story to friends, neighbors, and even family members who lived farther away. Each time she told it, she emphasized the importance of dignity, quiet strength, and the value of standing up against cruelty. She realized that the incident, which had initially filled her with fear, had transformed into a story of hope and inspiration. She never sought fame or recognition for what had happened. Instead, she focused on the lessons learned, the power of calm courage, the importance of supporting others, and the undeniable truth that no one should be humiliated or disrespected. And while she may never have imagined that a simple Saturday walk could turn into such a defining moment, she knew that the experience would stay with her forever. Ellen also thought about the biker, and she hoped he had learned something from the encounter. Perhaps he would reflect on his behavior, understand the consequences of cruelty, and choose a better path in the future. The thought gave her a sense of closure, a quiet hope that even those who act with malice can change when confronted with courage and integrity. As night fell, Ellen closed her eyes and felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt earlier in the day. The street outside her window was quiet once more, the town settling into its usual rhythm. Yet she knew that the memory of the afternoon, the fear, the confrontation, the courage, would remain vivid. It was a story she could carry with her, a reminder that even in a world where cruelty exists, goodness and bravery can prevail. Ellen smiled softly to herself. Life, she realized, is often unpredictable, but it is in those unpredictable moments that true character is revealed. And sometimes the smallest acts, standing up quietly, offering protection, showing kindness, can make the biggest difference. The morning after the incident, Ellen woke up feeling a mixture of relief and quiet pride. The memory of the biker's cruel words still lingered, but it no longer carried the same sting. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty, yet she had endured it with dignity, and she had experienced something rare, a moment of courage and protection from a stranger who had stepped in when it mattered most. As she moved through her morning routine, Ellen reflected on what had happened. She remembered the roar of the motorcycles, the harshness of the biker's insults, and the sudden fear that had gripped her. Yet she also recalled the calm authority of the man who had stood beside her, the way he had spoken without anger, and the way his presence had shifted the energy of the street. That memory brought a warmth to her heart. It reminded her that even in a world where cruelty exists, kindness and courage are never far away. Ellen decided to take a short walk later that morning. The sun was gentle, the air fresh, and the streets quieter than the day before. She noticed neighbors tending to their gardens, children playing, and the small town returning to its usual rhythm. Yet there was a subtle difference in how she viewed the world now. She felt stronger, more aware of her own resilience, and more certain of the value of dignity and kindness. As she walked, some neighbors stopped her, curious about the previous day's events. People had heard rumors, whispers of a confrontation, and the bravery of someone stepping in to protect her. Ellen, ever humble, did not boast. She simply recounted the events calmly, emphasizing how important it was to maintain dignity, even when faced with cruelty. She spoke of courage, not as a loud act of defiance, but as the quiet determination to stand firm and protect oneself and others. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," Ellen told them. "I simply stayed calm and refused to let him make me feel small." And someone else, someone who could have walked away, chose to stand up. That made all the difference. The neighbors listened intently, some nodded in agreement, while others seemed to reflect on their own experiences and actions. Ellen realized that the impact of the event was growing beyond the street where it had occurred. People were beginning to understand that courage and kindness could ripple outward, influencing the way others behaved and the way communities responded to cruelty.